Welcome back. You are listening to Nate the Hate on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And with that, I'd like to welcome in my co-host, Modern Vintage Gamer.
What's going on, Nate? Great to be here. Very, very exciting times. We're imminently waiting for the Switch 2 Direct, and we have a lot to talk about.
We do. As the Switch 2 Direct looms just over the horizon, this is a day of great anticipation for a lot of Nintendo fans as we see what Nintendo has planned for their next generation system. And everyone wants to know what type of games we will be seeing from Nintendo, what type of new features the hardware will feature beyond the mouse Joy-Con, as well as what type of support we will see from third parties, as the Switch was kind of a turning point in terms of third-party support for Nintendo platforms. And if you are a long-term Nintendo fan, you know NES, Super NES had stellar third-party support. It began to wane when it came to the N64 GameCube, saw a spike on the Wii, crashed on the Wii U, but it had a resurgence with the Switch as Nintendo was able to find footing with an audience that composed of youth and adult because the Switch concept was so appealing to a mass audience of gamers and gaming types. And in a certain effect, it was kind of the blue ocean that they did so well with the DS and the Wii, but even more harmonized as the hybrid concept really appealed to parents and their children as you were able to play a game on the go, docked, or just in your leisure as you were watching movies, sports, or maybe you had multiple Switches in your household and you were able to engage in local multiplayer with your children, your spouse, or whomever, friend. And now we're on the eve of the Switch 2 Direct, and Nintendo has a lot to answer. And we're going to start with that with the price and the release date for the new hardware. What are your thoughts and predictions when it comes to price and release date for the Switch 2?
Ooh, you're just getting it out there quickly, right? I like it. I like it. I think the price is going to be $399, Nate. But I will say I don't have a great amount of certainty on that. I think it sounds good from a sales perspective that they want to keep it under $400, but I can't help but wonder if the tariff increases and various other factors may bump that price up over 400 to 450. But I'm going to stick to my guns and say $399. Now, before I give you release date estimates and stuff like that, what do you think it's going to be priced at?
My base price expectation is the same as yours, $399, but I am willing to entertain that $499 ceiling, as you mentioned, be it for tariff reasons and things of that nature that maybe Nintendo had to make a pivot or were waiting to see how tariffs would be implemented as to whether or not that would affect their price or even their global pricing. So I think $399 is the most likely outcome here,
Yep.
but I wouldn't be too surprised if we saw a $499 price point for the system. And when you look at what we are getting, larger screen, very cutting edge technology, maybe that $499 price isn't too out of reach, but it's all going to come down to where Nintendo feels as though they can reach the market and also be able to turn some sort of profit, even if minimal. So I'm hopeful $399 is the price that sticks.
Now, for the release date, I mean, I keep thinking that sometime in June is going to be when it finally gets released. And the reason for that is obviously there is the road shows that are going around the country and indeed around parts of the world. And I believe, Nate, they finish at the beginning of June, if I'm not mistaken. There may be a little bit of overlap there, but I think for me, sometime in June, sometime in the middle of June. So let's say, the week of the 16th. It sounds kind of about right to me, but honestly, it's just, throw a dart at a dartboard with the month of June on there. And I think any kind of week could be it.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you for the month of June, even dating back to January, even last year. There's a lot of talk of that May to June window. And I'm going with June. I'm going with the third week of June, very similar to you,
Yep.
around that Father's Day week. So middle of the month. I'd love for it to be a little sooner, but I think if you come after Summer Games Fest, you come a couple of weeks outside of the Nintendo Switch 2 Experience Tour you have PAX East, you have all that happen, and then Nintendo is going to have a direct sometime in June, like they always have.
Right.
And it's just a question of will that direct air before or after the Switch 2 release date? Because that would be a good venue for them to further showcase some of the games coming to the platform in the second half of this year. So I'm thinking middle of June as well. And I think that's a fine point for them to release. It's right around the time school will be letting out in a lot of the states. So begin your summer vacation, get new hardware, and enjoy some, hopefully, entertaining gaming over the summer break and, keep your kids busy with a new Switch 2.
Yeah. It makes sense to me.
Now, for the show itself, as we're leading into this direct, we know it's going to be 60 minutes in length. What type of pacing do you expect from this? We know naturally a large portion of the show will be dedicated to software, but Nintendo also has a lot to talk about when it comes to the hardware side of things. They really have to demonstrate the mouse Joy-Con feature beyond what we saw in the teaser trailer. They also have to detail the screen, the specifications of the screen, be it size, resolution, refresh rate, battery life, a lot of those more minute details that are somewhat important to the consumer, but especially the gamer. You want to know how long you're going to be able to game on this device. You want to know the resolution. You want to know whether that screen has VRR support
Yep.
or HDR, things like that have become very important to gamers over the last several years. So when it comes to the hardware, Nintendo definitely has a lot of work cut out for them in terms of relaying specs and such. But they also just have to outline everything about the hardware, be it some of the other features we don't know about, like the mysterious C button that everyone is talking about of what could it be? They have to relay that, but there's also going to be other features of what will be new. Will the eShop be improved? Will NSO see new hardware be introduced when it comes to Switch 2, perhaps GameCube, and things of that nature? So when it comes to the pacing of the show in terms of features and stuff regarding the hardware, what are you expecting from them?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I think there's probably going to be at least one third of this direct focused on the hardware, maybe even a little bit more than that, because Nintendo really has to sell you on. When I say you, I don't mean you and me, because we're already sold on this, but they have to sell this to their customers. That, again, I think I mentioned this in the direct predictions episode previously. People that have just kind of bought a Switch or upgraded what to one in the last 12 months or so, 18 months, they have to really kind of focus on what makes the Switch 2 such a compelling device that maybe you need to think about, getting on an upgrade path to getting one. So I think they're going to spend quite a bit of time walking through the hardware itself. Obviously, they won't give us much in terms of specs. I think things like memory, the amount of memory we have, and clock speeds and all that. That's not obviously going to be a part of the show. I don't think Nintendo even ever discloses that stuff. I think people kind of find that information out later on after various tech deep dives, analysis, and things. I would expect Digital Foundry maybe to cover that aspect of it. But what they will do, Nate, I feel like, is they are going to give us a closer look at the hardware, and they are going to walk us through all the mysterious features of the Switch 2. So they will probably spend a little bit of time showing us what the C button's all about, what that does. And while we're here, do you have any knowledge of the C button, or do you have a guess as to what it is? I have a few ideas, but nothing really seems to stick for me. But do you have any thoughts on what the mysterious C button would be?
No, I really don't have any knowledge as to what the C button could be. If I
Mhm.
had to guess, it's going to be maybe something to do with a social media platform or a community button type of thing. I mean, that's
Yeah,
pure speculation. I feel like there's probably more hype around the button
I
than what the
agree.
payoff's going to end up being.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you're right. And obviously, the Joy-Con mouse functionality, they'll give us some demonstrations on that. They may even have a little, cool little app or something that comes with the OS that you can kind of mess around with, some paint app that you can share online with, with your friends via Nintendo account. I mean, we're talking about Nintendo here, so they loved, adding their little gimmicks in. And I think there will be a couple of those things. But aside from that, it's really about the hardware itself. They're going to show us a lot more of it. They're going to show us a real system rather than just a 3D render of it. And, the various features that it has with regards to the Joy-Cons. But I don't know, like it really is something that they will show off. They'll definitely show off the larger screen, and they'll really kind of promote that. And yeah, I mean, maybe a look at the user interface as well. Potentially, they'll show us what that looks like. Again, I don't know if that's going to be radically different from the existing Switch, but I think it's really just, hey, this is our new piece of hardware. It's still a part of the Switch family, but we also want to make sure that you're familiar with every facet of what we're trying to offer here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement with you on that stuff. And I think it's also going to be a good venue for them to go over Nintendo Switch online enhancements and new platforms that will come to the Switch 2 and likely even the Switch itself
Mhm.
in the future, maybe within that first launch year. And I think GameCube is very likely. I've
Yes.
heard GameCube will be coming to NSO. It's just a question of when, not if. And maybe you give a nice little roadmap of some of the titles that would come to the GameCube NSO app. But the other thing I think that they will approach, at least to a certain sense of degree, is going to be their approach to backwards compatibility. Nintendo has been very forthcoming where they confirm backwards compatibility is enabled on the Switch 2, but we don't know to what extent. Is this going to be enhanced games like we've seen on PS5 and Xbox Series? Or are we going to get a more rudimentary approach to backwards compatibility that we have seen in the past, be it from Nintendo or even Sony and Microsoft on previous systems? If I had to guess, I think we're getting a very basic form of backwards compatibility. And if Nintendo want to enhance games, we would see them do native Switch 2 patches and they would release the game that way, where
Mhm.
you could get better visuals, better performance, maybe even new content as a way to entice you to upgrade your game. But in terms of just backwards compatibility, I think they have to outline that here. And I'm wondering to what percentage of the Switch base we're going to get in terms of compatibility. Are we going to get 90%? Are we going to come in lower? Is this going to be something Nintendo continues to build on and improves over a period of time? And right now, I'm kind of expecting them to maybe have like a 75% backwards compatibility rate at launch. And they'll launch a website of some kind where you can search games you have to see if it is compatible on the platform. And then maybe Nintendo will say over a period of time, be it the first year, whatever, that they are going to approach this and they're going to continue to address issues or matters with their backwards compatibility layer.
Mhm.
And it's going to improve, and more games will get added to backwards compatibility over a period of time. And it really just matters as to how they approach backwards compatibility. Is it emulation? What did they do to solve for that backwards compatibility layer? And I think that's something they have to at least touch on in the presentation so that if you are a Switch consumer, if you have built up a large digital library, that you can have confidence that the majority of your digital games will be transferred over to the Switch 2 without any performance or playing options.
Yeah, I mean, this is really the $1 million question, and it's kind of answers the video that I made, 2.5 years ago about how Nintendo will solve the backward compatibility problem that they have. And look, it's very hard to say which way they've gone with this. I would say that there's probably a mix of emulation, traditional emulation, with hooks into the Tegra chip as well. So the Tegra chip maybe has some hooks in place that offers backward compatibility, very similar to what we have with the PS5 and the PS4. But if you do remember, you mentioned a website. If you do recall, the PlayStation 5, when that released, there was I'm not sure if it was a website, but there was definitely communication. There was a page, some type of web page on their blog post or on Sony PlayStation's website where they did outline many of the games that weren't running. And I remember Joe's Diner was one of them because I was very unhappy that that game didn't work for me, and I have it. So yeah, I would expect that. But the thing with backward compatibility is it's never going to be 100% across the board. There's always going to be exceptions, and those exceptions need to be documented, which means that there has to be some type of communication surrounding games that potentially won't run. But I think you're right. I think backward compatibility is something that obviously will be available out of the gate, and it will see improvements as time goes on. But I will also say it's one of the areas of the Switch 2 that I'm very interested in. So I know you and I will be definitely talking more about it as we learn more about the hardware. But I'll also be kind of focusing on some, my own videos when the time comes when I get my hands on the hardware, hopefully in June. But I think you're right. Backward compatibility will be on display, and I think we'll definitely see what that looks like. And probably in what you said, I agree that there's probably not going to be any enhancements as far as backward compatible titles, but there will be specific game enhancements to specific games that Nintendo has offered to enhance, and not only Nintendo, obviously other third party publishers as well.
Yeah, one key thing with backwards compatibility that I do hope they answer, it's going to come down to the controller situation, where if I'm playing a Switch 1 game on my Switch 2, will I need to use a Switch 1 Joy-Con or controller, or will it be compatible with the Switch 2 Joy-Cons?
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that they will have to answer. I mean, technically, I don't see any reason a game wouldn't be compatible with the new controller, but we have seen in the past sometimes they're not. Be it on other platforms, you do need the controller from that specific thing because it will recognize it as a Switch 1 game, so it's looking for a Switch 1 Joy-Con.
Right.
So there are details that they are going to have to provide answers for, not necessarily in the presentation itself. They can answer these on a website about backwards compatibility closer to launch, or maybe even immediately following the direct. But these are things that they will have to give some sort of communication to. Now, I do want to talk about Nintendo Switch enhanced titles or Nintendo Switch 2 editions,
Mm-hmm.
as we saw that on a website Nintendo put up just last week. And these are the games, as you kind of mentioned. These aren't going to be backwards compatible games. These are games of Switch 1 nature that are getting patched to become native Switch 2 releases, where Nintendo or a third party could feasibly enhance the visuals, improve performance, offer new content, and stuff like that. And I think that will definitely be a feature of the Direct itself, where Nintendo will detail some of these games. And I think Nintendo is going to embrace that approach. I think titles like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, maybe Pikmin 4, because I think Pikmin 4 could really utilize the mouse Joy-Con in some unique ways. And you include some new content to these games that may entice people to revisit the games. And I'd also be interested to see how Nintendo would approach these types of releases, because would you now bring these to retail as native Switch 2 games, or does more be an incentive for digital purchasers to just upgrade their digital versions or already owned physical copies? Because, how do you kind of price it? You find yourself in a situation similar to Sony, where here's Horizon Forbidden West on PS4 for $60, or you can buy the PS5 version for $70. You start creating a price discrepancy where, let's assume these enhancements are free.
Yep.
There's no reason to purchase a Switch 2 version unless it's priced identically to the Switch 1 version. And if it is free, you can just continue to sell the Switch 1 version of the game, because the user is just going to upgrade it when they play it on their Switch 2. So I'm kind of curious how they will approach a retail release of these games when the time comes. But I do think this will be a fairly prominent point of the Direct itself, of just enhancing Switch 1 games with native Switch 2 releases.
Yeah, totally agree. I think there's not going to be any set rhyme or reason for it. I think Nintendo will offer in different ways. So there may be the $10 update patch that you pay for. It may also be something that could be behind NSO Premium subscription. We've obviously seen them do things like that outside of the emulation stuff that they do. Or it could just be we're going to offer you a complete edition of a Switch 2 native version of Breath of the Wild that has all the DLC, everything on a single cartridge, Switch 2, and it has 4K, 60 frames per second, well, 4K upscale, I should say, 60 frames per second. I think really it's a matter of what the game is and how interested people are. Yeah, I think Breath of the Wild is a great example of a game that would probably see an enhanced version on Switch 2 because it just continues to sell. And I think if Nintendo can basically move their customers that want to buy Breath of the Wild off the Switch and have them move on to the Switch 2 and just continue that sales, that long tail that this game has had for such a long time, then they've done their job. But there's also other games, Nate, that I think about that could absolutely see enhancements with a Switch 2 update. And that would be games like Age of Calamity. We know that obviously it has performance issues. It doesn't look great. And something like that would take advantage of a very basic, recompilation of that source code targeting Switch 2. And it could run and look a lot better with minimal updates, right, from a developer. So I think there's going to be a smorgasbord of different updates for Switch 2, different enhancements. There's probably not going to be a set path. I think it's just going to be on a game-by-game basis, depending on the game itself and how successful it's been for Nintendo and third parties, of course.
Yeah, that's kind of my expectation with enhanced Switch 1 games. I think it's going to be games that have sold well, that continue to see strong sales, and the company just views them as a good opportunity to enhance them, get people to either repurchase or maybe buy for the first time and play it on the Switch 2, where it essentially acts as a filler release for certain individuals. But I want to go to Nintendo themselves in terms of software now to give some of our thoughts and predictions of what Nintendo could show up here with. And my first prediction is that there will be no 3D Mario at this direct.
There will be no 3D Mario at this direct. I agree with you. Initially, I thought maybe there would be. If you asked me maybe a month ago, but as time has gone on, especially now that we've seen a glimpse of Mario Kart 9, it seems like there is no 3D Mario at this particular showcase. But like you said, you mentioned a June direct. There's probably room for that later on, but for this, probably not. I would agree.
Yeah, my approach to this is my mentality for this entire presentation is that what we're seeing software wise from Nintendo and third parties, and even just the general tone of the show, is that this is going to be launch window focused.
Yep.
This isn't going to be, let's show you a long term roadmap like we've seen from Sony and Microsoft at their hardware reveal presentations. This is going to be what you're going to be playing in the immediate. And then when you have a June direct, you can say, okay, 3D Mario is our big holiday game. Now we're going to showcase that. That's going to get you excited. But right now, in this April 2nd direct, let's show you what you're playing on day one and within those opening few months. So I don't expect to see a new 3D Mario here. I do expect that we'll see Metroid Prime 4. It will be given a release date, and we'll see the type of enhancements the game will benefit from when it is on Switch 2.
Yes, I agree. I think Metroid Prime 4 will show up. You talked me out of Metroid Prime 4 not showing up at the direct last week because I was thinking to myself, it's not going to be there. It's not going to be there. And then it shows up. But I do think that we'll see the kind of the ultimate conclusion of the Metroid Prime 4 saga at this particular direct. So I agree with you on that one.
What I also expect that Nintendo is going to show up with a new title from EAD Tokyo. I think their new project will be shown here. I couldn't begin to speculate or guess what the game will be, but I do think we see something new from that studio. And, they always manage to impress. So I'm hopeful that whatever they show up with will be impressive.
Yeah. I think you're right. EAD will show up with something. There's been some talk about a, Ocarina of Time remake and various other things. I don't think those are substantial, those are real. I think that's a lot of hopes and dreams. But who knows? I mean, they're responsible for, Donkey Kong, Mario, Zelda, F-Zero, Star Fox, Pikmin, Animal Crossing. There's I mean, again, throw data at a dartboard and pick one almost. But what I'd like to see, Nate, I don't know if this will happen. I'd like to see something new, a new IP. That would be really interesting for a new platform, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it would definitely be interesting for like a new IP to show up. I think anything from the studio would generate excitement because any internal game from Nintendo that is AAA caliber generally is well received. Even the very odd beta test they did last year
Mhm.
that leaked immediately, it was well received by the 10,000 people who were able to play it. So, let's see what Nintendo has in store because Nintendo is going to need unique ideas to maybe sell some of the concept of this new system. You can't just go iterative and say, here's the expected. Here's a new 3D Mario. Here's a new 2D Mario. Here's a new Zelda game. You want to see innovation. You want to see new experimental projects. So hopefully, whatever EAD Tokyo is up to, I want to see something a little experimental and lead excitement from that. Now, the obvious game that everyone's anticipating to see here is the brand new Mario Kart game. This was the game they showed in the teaser trailer for the Switch 2. So naturally, we should get a more substantial blowout in terms of game direction, gameplay, new features, multiplayer, all that good stuff. What is going to be the selling hook for this game after having played Mario Kart 8 for the better part of a decade? Mario Kart, be it 9, 10, whatever they want to call it, is going to need something to differentiate itself from Mario Kart 8.
Yeah.
And what's it going to be?
Well, I mean, obviously there's the 24 races on a single track, so they've obviously expanded the multiplayer. But is that going to be enough? I don't know. So there has to be more, right? And I think they have something that they know is going to really impress us, especially those that have kind of played Mario Kart for a long time and they kind of want something new. But that's a good question. Maybe there is something else that they have, or maybe it's just a brand new Mario Kart game where they don't really look at the old stuff and they've just created, a whole bunch of new tracks and they've designed these courses specifically for 24 kart racing, which, that may be enough. I don't know. But yeah, that's going to be interesting to see what that looks like. But I do think that, if Mario Kart 9 will be there, which I think it will be, they're going to have something really cool to show us.
Beyond these games, I'm kind of just anticipating that Nintendo will have a few of the previously mentioned Nintendo Enhanced or Nintendo Switch 2 edition games of prior Switch 1 games, as mentioned, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Pikmin 4, stuff in that vein. Because again, it comes back to that launch window. I don't think Nintendo is going to come in with just a huge lineup of first party games within the first few months. It's going to be here's Mario Kart, here's Metroid Prime, here's some enhanced Switch 1 games like Breath of the Wild.
Do
And then
they
going into that June Direct, we get a bigger look at what's to come.
do they tease the next Legend of Zelda game now in development?
I mean, I do think Nintendo will tease something that is a little further down the pipeline, be it 2026. And whether that's a new game from Monolith or a brand new Zelda game, as you mentioned, I'd say flip a coin, but I do think we'll see something like that from the company. Not to, it's not going to be to sell the hardware. It's just something as a long term promise of
Right.
here's your first look at what these studios are up to. And when you look at the output, be it from Monolith or from the Zelda team, Tears of the Kingdom came out 2 years ago. The game was finished, I believe, a year prior to its release. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 has been out now for a couple of years as well. So both of these teams should be well into their next projects
Yeah.
and are very likely ready to show something. Would we get both of them in this presentation? That almost sounds too good to be true. I would imagine they'd probably hold one or a June Direct or maybe a September Direct later this year. But if I had to choose between Monolith and a brand new Zelda game, I think I would prefer to see the new Zelda game, but I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up being a Monolith.
Right. Right. I think you're right on that one. Now, the other question I have is, will Sakurai show up with a new Smash Brothers game, or do you think that's a later date thing, or do you not even think there is a new Smash Brothers game that he's working on something completely different?
I think there is a new Smash Brothers game in development, but I feel as though it might be too soon to do that type of tease right now, because I would imagine they're probably looking at Smash Brothers and saying, well, what do we do next? We called our game Smash Brothers Ultimate. So it's kind of the peak. You're not going to go
It
any higher
really
than that.
is.
You had very iconic third party representation in the game. Are you going to be able to match that? I also wouldn't be surprised if they're sitting there saying we can either do a new concept where we essentially reboot it, or we take Smash Ultimate, get agreement from all third parties to once again license the characters, and bring that game over to Switch 2, but maybe position it more as a live service game where we can continue to add new content, stages, modes, and such, and just fuel it that way. So there might still be a lot of conversation going into what direction they want to take the next Smash Brothers game in. But with the mouse Joy-Con, one thought that will come to my mind forever, unless it eventually happens, is that this is the perfect opportunity to port Kid Icarus Uprising to a
Yeah.
platform.
Yep.
So, I mean, that would be a smaller project, not a grand undertaking to make happen. So maybe if Sakurai shows up, maybe it's with Kid Icarus, but I'm kind of not anticipating Sakurai to be at this particular showcase. Maybe that is, again, something, be it in June or September later this year, that they would show what he's working on for the Switch 2.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to say exactly how Nintendo is going to approach long term projects in terms of when they're going to reveal them in relation to release.
Yep. I agree with you.
Now, a big portion of the show naturally is going to be third party support and what type of games we're going to be seeing in those opening months. And we've kind of discussed what's going to be that Skyrim moment for the Switch 2. And there's a lot of options that could, possibly take that place here. But let's start alphabetically with various third party supporters that could show up. And we'll start with Activision.
Hmm.
I think this is actually brilliant timing for the Switch 2 Direct to take place, because this week is when Warzone launches its new season for Call of Duty. And we know Microsoft has made commitment to bring Call of Duty to Switch and Switch 2. And with the release being, let's say, June, you don't necessarily have to bring Black Ops 6 over to Switch 2, but you can bring Warzone free to play, mention Warzone's available day one, and then give commitment that this holiday's Call of Duty will be available later this year. And I think that's an announcement that the Call of Duty fan base can get excited about, and even some Switch fans who maybe just want a good first person shooter on their Nintendo platform can kind of rally behind.
Yeah, that's a good pick, and we've seen Microsoft and obviously the court case, some of the leaked documents surrounding Call of Duty. Phil Spencer obviously has made comments about bringing their games everywhere. Call of Duty on Switch is something that is a foregone conclusion for me. And I like it. I like Warzone kind of showing up first. I think it's a pretty good announcement to make. And yeah, I mean, I think there is the new Warzone drops, I think, the day after the direct. So the timing is
Mhm.
is very good for this. So yes, I think you offer Warzone free to play, and with the commitment that there'll be a bigger Call of Duty game coming later. I think that's a pretty good way of getting people on the Switch 2 playing Call of Duty games, and I think that would be pretty big, not only for Nintendo but obviously for Activision as well, and Microsoft, of course.
That then brings up Bethesda. And I'm not expecting to see anything from Bethesda in this direct. I don't think Bethesda will actually have a release for Switch 2 in calendar year of 2025. I think their support will come later down the line, maybe in 2026, as they begin to, shop and consider what type of games they can port over to the platform. I know for a long time, people were speculating that the Switch 2 had to launch on May 15th because that was the release date for Doom Dark Ages. And that date has nothing to do with the Switch 2.
Yeah.
Doom Dark Ages will not be a day one release on Switch 2, to my knowledge. So I'm not expecting anything from Bethesda here.
Yeah, I don't think so either. They will show up eventually, Nate, but not at this event at least. I think you're right.
Now, then we have Capcom. Capcom was a very big supporter of the Switch, and I see no reason for them not to be a big supporter of the Switch too. I think from Capcom, we will see Street Fighter 6. We will see maybe Resident Evil 2, 3, and Resident Evil 4 Remake. And honestly, I think that's a pretty good lineup from Capcom if they can show up with one or all of those games in this presentation.
That's a very strong lineup. I don't know if they'll be there with everything that you just said, but I'm pretty confident that everything that you said will find its way to the Switch too. So it's a matter of what they show us tomorrow. Street Fighter 6 is a good pick. The Switch needs some good fighting games. And look, Resident Evil, I mean, they were all cloud-based games previously, so I think it's a W for Nintendo if they can show us that, hey, we've got these games running natively on Switch 2 hardware. We've got the RE engine dialed in really, really nice, and it's sizzling now. We've got good frame rates and we've got good visuals. Yeah, I think RE games, I mean, take your pick. There's obviously quite a few of them. Probably all of them eventually will find their way to the Switch 2. I'm going to say probably a Street Fighter 6 and a Resident Evil game announcement. Not sure which one. 2 is a good one. 2 Remake is a good one. I mean, I could also see Village showing up. It just depends. But yeah, I think Capcom will definitely be there.
CD Projekt Red.
So this is something that I've spoken about for a while now. I think Cyberpunk 2077 is going to be that Skyrim moment. Because every time NVIDIA shows off their new chips, their new hardware, I feel like we always see Cyberpunk 2077 benchmarks running side by side with here's the old frame rate and here's the new improved frame rate. So I think we're going to see something similar with the Switch 2. I think Cyberpunk 2077 is a game that will come out for the Switch 2. It'll probably be at this showcase. So that's for me. That for me is going to be that Skyrim moment for the Switch 2.
Yeah, I mean, I am in agreement with you that the game will show up. I still have no interest in the game whatsoever, but I think it would be kind of that nice game to show off the ray tracing, DLSS benefits and stuff. Just be like, here's the game. It runs in handheld mode. It looks good. It kind of makes a statement from a technical standpoint. Again, it's a game I have no interest in. I know people have said they've turned things around very significantly with the release. I still don't care. But I do agree from a technical standpoint, it's definitely something that would kind of make a statement in regards to the hardware.
It's very clever too. It's very clever because this game came out on the Xbox One and the PS4 originally. It's not a new game. It's been around for quite a while now. And I think it's around the same age as The Witcher 3 was when Nintendo brought that to the Switch originally. So I think this is really just the next iteration of the same type of approach they've had. You have this kind of monster mammoth open world game that technically is very, very impressive. It's had some bumps along the way, of course, but now is in a very polished state. Nintendo continues to use it as their test bench to show off new features and enhancements. So we've got a new Tegra chip inside the Switch 2, of course. So yeah, this is, I don't want to say it's a lock because, of course, nothing is a lock until the show happens, but this is about as close of a lock as it could be, in my opinion.
Then go to EA, a company who was not the most supportive of the Switch. And I think it's going to be different this time around. I'm not going to say they're going to be a huge supporter of the Switch 2, but I think they will be more prominent supporter than they were on the Switch. And I think we will see over the course of the generation, we will see their soccer game, we will see Madden, and such find ways to the Switch 2 platform. But I think at this particular showcase, we will see EA announce Mass Effect Legendary Edition, as well as the two Star Wars games. I believe it's what Jedi Survivor,
Yep.
and I forget the name of the other one. I didn't play them because I'm not a Star
Survivor,
Wars person.
Survivor, and I keep wanting to say Outcast, but that's not the game. That's the older spy game. Yeah, Fallen Order is the other one, I believe.
Yeah, it sounds
Yes,
right. So I
yes,
think
Fallen Order.
those two Star Wars games, as well as the Mass Effect Legendary Edition, will be announced for Switch 2 as kind of EA's first releases on the platform. And if you're an RPG fan, and from what I've heard, the Star Wars games are kind of like a 3D Metroidvania, it sounds as though you would be eating pretty good with those 3 releases, or 6 releases if you want to count each Mass Effect game as an individual release from the trilogy. And I think that's a good starting point for EA to introduce themselves to the Switch 2 audience of Mass Effect is well received. Here's 2 Star Wars games that were also very well received. We're here. We will be bringing Madden later this year, or maybe next year, depending on how the schedules and such align for development. And then fans can say, okay, EA's on board. This is kind of exciting. Hopefully they stick around. And another prediction I'm going to make, even it's not related to EA, I just don't know where to put it. It's related to Star Wars. I hope there is a company out there, I don't know who, just somebody, is making the Rogue Squadron games from GameCube,
Oh God, yes.
and they're making them
Please.
for a modern platform, and it will be for the Switch too.
Yeah, that would be great. I would love to see that. Yeah, if we're talking Star Wars, we got to put that into the universe. I would love to see that on the Switch too. That would be
Yeah,
sensational.
that's my will into the universe type release. Only thought of it because we brought up Star Wars, so you know,
Yep.
let's will that one into existence. But from EA, go to FromSoft, who, they did bring Dark Souls 2 over to or Dark Souls remaster over to the Switch. And Elden Ring has been in a lot of rumor circles. It's been in a lot of communication as a title that will come to Switch 2, and makes a lot of sense here for Elden Ring, a complete edition. So it'd be the base game plus Shadow of the Erdtree to come to Switch 2. I think that would definitely get some excitement from individuals who either haven't played the game or wouldn't mind revisiting the game. I personally put over 200 hours into the game on my Xbox, so I'm not too eager to start from zero. But I think a lot of people would have interest in playing Elden Ring on a portable platform.
Agree. I think Elden Ring is a game that will definitely show up to this event. Like you, I've played many, many hours of Elden Ring, over 200 hours. I don't know if I would start another character. Maybe if there's cross saves or something in there, that may be compelling for me to jump on board. But either way, Elden Ring again is another one of those games that it's been out for a while now. Not as long as Cyberpunk. It's been out for about 3 years, I believe. 2022, it dropped, and again, it started its life on the PS4. So if the Switch 2 hardware specs are to be believed that it sort of kind of sits between a PS4 and a PS5, it's the right target. So yeah, Elden Ring is definitely a good pick, and it would get a lot of hype, I think, if that was announced for the Switch 2.
You then have some other third party companies, be it Ubisoft. And, Ubisoft, we already know, is going to be a pretty big supporter of the platform. Talked about this earlier this year, where I have heard in the launch window we should see games from them that include Assassin's Creed Mirage.
Mhm.
Rainbow Six Siege was something that was being considered. So I'd say at minimum we see Assassin's Creed Mirage at this presentation, or maybe Ubisoft announces it immediately after, sometime this week. Maybe we see a Mario Rabbids collection featuring the first 2 games enhanced for Switch 2. But, Ubisoft is definitely considering and weighing considerable support for the platform. But at the same time, things are kind of volatile at the company itself. So maybe certain projects that are being considered may not happen because they are trying to figure out their financials.
Yeah.
But at least Assassin's Creed Mirage should be there day one or generally within that launch window. Um, Going back to Japanese support, though, we know Sega is naturally going to be a huge supporter of the platform.
Yes.
They supported the Switch with, Sonic games. You just brought a Yakuza game over to Switch. And from what I've heard, Yakuza and Like a Dragon, this is a franchise and game series that Sega really has great ambitions to bring over to the Switch too. It's just a question of which Yakuza and Like a Dragon game will be the first to come to the platform. But I think we will see an announcement related to that franchise in this presentation. And then, whether we see a Sonic announcement or anything else from Sega, it's probably a safe guess we will see some significant support from the company over the span of the generation and all future directs relating to the Switch 2 when it comes from Sega. From Atlas, I think it would be the same thing. Whatever game they are releasing will have a Switch 2 version. It's just a question of when will they make their first announcement? Could we see a director's cut or an enhanced version of, be it a Persona game or any of their recent releases? It's hard to say at this point, but I do expect Sega and Atlas to have some meaningful support and announcements at this particular presentation.
Yeah, they'll definitely show up with something. There's going to be something Sonic related. I wonder if they're going to show us this crazy taxi game that they've been working on as well. I mean, there's definitely a lot of possibilities when it comes to Sega, but I do agree that they will definitely show up with something. Just a matter of what that would look like. Probably a Yakuza game, Like a Dragon, could be a good pick. Yeah, it's a tough one to predict because Sega has such a vast array of IP, a lot of games that they're currently working on, and a lot of history and a lot of
Mhm.
legacy as well. So it's take your pick on that one. But yeah, look, their big money makers obviously are Yakuza, Persona, those big games, Sonic. So take your pick. I think any one of those three or any two of those three potentially could show up.
Then we have Square Enix, where I do anticipate Square will announce at minimum Final Fantasy VII Remake for the Switch 2, and I think that will be within that launch window timeframe. Rebirth, I don't know if necessarily they will announce it here because that is a 2026 release. They may announce it just for maximum impact and value to say, hey, we're committed, we're bringing Final Fantasy VII Remake, Rebirth, and such to the platform. Be like, whoa, this is awesome. Square Enix is really giving, you know, high level of support. But I also think Square Enix might have another announcement to go alongside them, but something smaller.
Yeah.
Maybe Final Fantasy Tactics finally gets announced. I don't think this is the proper venue to announce the Final Fantasy IX remake. Maybe we get something like a Bravely Default remake.
I was just going to throw out they're going to do Octopath 3 without a rhyme or
Okay, that's
reason. I'm
interesting.
just throwing that out there. I don't know how well Octopath 1 and 2 sold. I'm not sure if they were like monster sellers, but I remember Octopath 1 was an early game for the Switch. So Octopath 3, I'm going to just put that out there.
I don't hate that prediction. But I think, Square, I think, will have a fairly meaningful presence in this presentation. And there are two companies I have intentionally avoided and kind of saved for the end. So before I bring them up, I want to go to you to see if there's any other companies we may have forgotten that you wanted to bring up.
We haven't talked about Rockstar. Is that one of the companies you were thinking of?
That was not one of the two. So Rockstar is a good one to bring up.
Okay, well, a lot of people are saying GTA 6, right? But I still have questions about the Switch 2, whether it's even powerful enough to run GTA 6. And I say that knowing that we haven't seen the game other than we've seen the trailer, right? We haven't seen the game. We haven't seen it running on any other piece of hardware, and we haven't seen the Switch 2. So I'm basically going in completely you know, oblivious to whatever may come my way. But I don't think the Switch 2 can handle GTA 6 based on the information that we know the Switch 2 is as far as its, perceived specifications and whatnot. So I still think Rockstar will turn up though, and I think they're going to show us GTA 5. Now you may think, well, what is the point of that? But GTA 5 is how Rockstar gets a foothold on the Nintendo hardware. They start with GTA 5. We obviously know, there's an amazing studio that's already ported, Red Dead Redemption and Double 11. They do great work. So I think GTA 5 is a game that may show up on the Switch too. GTA 6 could show up later, or it may not show up at all, based on what I said. But GTA 5 for me is a game that I think will be on the Switch too, and I'm going to just put it out there that it's going to be on the showcase.
I think the first time we see Rockstar show up on Switch 2 will be with Grand Theft Auto 6. It may not necessarily be at this showcase, but I think this is something that Nintendo wants to make happen. And they know the value of having a GTA trailer or even just the announcement to be paired with their hardware would generate. So if it's not here, maybe it's an announcement in June. We haven't had a new trailer for GTA 6 in a long time. And if Nintendo, let's say, was able to secure the new trailer, I think that is kind of a megaton moment for them.
Oh, that would break the
But
internet. If they somehow managed to secure a trailer for GTA 6 at a Nintendo Switch 2 showcase unveiling, we're talking records are going to break. The internet may actually shut down if that happens.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of a moment I think even Microsoft or Sony kind of has to pay attention to and say, okay, well, GTA 6 is going to be on Switch 2.
Yep.
That's not going to say it's going to be hugely disruptive to their brand, but it's something that they will sit there and say, okay, we weren't anticipating this. And maybe we have to be a little more aggressive in some of our marketing around the game when the time comes. But I think GTA 6 would be a very big announcement. It's just a question of what's the proper venue for the announcement to take place? Would it be here in April, or could it be something a little more down the line? But I do think it will end up on the Switch too. Another game, so this game I have heard should be within the launch window of the Switch 2. It's not a game that has any interest to me, doesn't appeal to my specific gaming taste. It is Larian's Baldur's Gate 3.
Really good pick. I think could very easily show up at the Switch 2 showcase and probably going to head to the Switch 2, let's be honest. It's obviously a game that won Game of the Year a couple of years ago. Very, very good game. And again, that could be, there's no guarantee that Cyberpunk is the Skyrim moment. This could be the Skyrim moment. Could very easily be that moment. So yeah, Baldur's Gate 3, yeah, sign me up. I think it's a good pick for sure.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of conversation that the game is supposed to be within the launch window. So this is a perfect venue to do that if this is indeed the focus of the show. And I know a lot of people love the game. I never played it. It's just not my cup of tea. But it would definitely generate a lot of interest and hype from individuals who are invested in that series. Now, the last two companies I want to touch on from third party are Sony and Microsoft.
Ooh.
I feel that both of them could show up in this presentation with some form of support. Microsoft being the more obvious and likely given their multi platform ambition. But I wouldn't be surprised to see a Sony game show up here. We just saw Patapon and Hotshot Golf show up in the Nintendo Switch Direct, where Sony licensed the IP to Bandai Namco to release on other platforms. So I wouldn't be too shocked to see another Sony IP be announced here for the Switch 2. And when it comes to Microsoft, anything and everything is on the table when it comes to them, be it Halo, enhanced versions of the Ori games,
Yep.
Sea of Thieves, Age of Empires, which would pair beautifully with the mouse Joy-Con.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
I think going into this presentation, it's going to further blur the lines between all competition where you're going to see Microsoft, you're going to see Sony games on the Switch 2 to varying levels. And it's just going to be like, okay, well, what are they offering here? And is it going to be a platform that I would want to experience these games? We also, from Sony, we had Lego Horizon
Hmm.
last year on the Switch.
Yeah.
So it's not a foreign concept for Sony to bring select properties over to a Nintendo system. But I think there exists reasonable possibility that both Microsoft and Sony have games in this direct for the Switch too.
What game do you think Sony would bring to the Switch 2? The one that sticks in my mind, there's actually two games. One is, I guess, technically not Sony. One is Horizon Zero Dawn,
Mhm,
and the other one is Death Stranding. Again, technically not Sony, Kojima Productions, and it's obviously on PC and Xbox now. But those two games would be a really good fit for the Switch 2, especially Horizon. We obviously saw Lego Horizon recently. So I think you're right. Sony will show up with something. There's obviously other games that could potentially be there instead of Horizon, maybe something a little smaller. And as for Microsoft, yeah, I mean, take your pick. Like they've made their intentions extremely clear. It's just really a matter of what game, what games they will show us at this showcase. That's a really good one. I mean, they could show us, that there's been rumors of the Master Chief Collection showing up for the Switch 2, Halo Infinite, something a little older as well. There's so many different possibilities that they could provide. There's even talk about Flight Simulator. I believe there was some discussion about that at some point.
mhm.
I'm not saying all these games are going to show up on the showcase, but I think Microsoft is very much invested in the Switch 2 as they are with the PlayStation at this point. So yeah, I think both of those publishers and hardware makers will definitely have a presence on April the 2nd.
See, from Sony, I think they could do some of their smaller IPs that maybe they don't view as high value, something like Gravity Rush.
Hmm.
I think that would cater well to the Switch audience. Um, Horizon has kind of been a thing I've seen people throw around a lot for some reason. Um, yeah, Sony, I think they would just find an IP that they know could do well on a Nintendo platform. And then Microsoft has said it can be literally anything and everything from them at this point. Like Age of Empires, I think just suits very well. Sea of Thieves is
Yeah.
something that will eventually come over. And it just comes down to when will the games hit the platform and is this the venue to make the announcement? But I am kind of anticipating both of these publishers to show up here. And as you mentioned with Death Stranding, I think Death Stranding will find its way to Switch 2 at some point, whether it's launch window or a little later in the year. It's up to 505 Publishing as to how quick they could get that port done. But considering the game is on Xbox, I think it's also on Mac PC.
Yeah, it's
So
everywhere.
there's so you may as well. I think it's also on. Isn't it on iPhones or iPads now as well?
I th-
I
yeah, I think it
think
is.
so.
Yeah.
So bring it over to the Switch. It'll find some audience. It may not be a huge audience given that the game is on so many devices at this point, but you price it right. People will buy it on the Switch. I personally love Death Stranding. I won't triple dip on the game at this point, but if you bring it over, I think there will be people who are interested and will give the game a go there. But third party wise, I think there's a lot of potential for new announcements here. Even if they are late ports or ports of recently released games, there's a lot of potential of what can come to the Switch 2. And I think Nintendo and third party partners kind of have to make a statement at the Direct tomorrow to say, here we are. Here's the support we're pledging in the immediate. Big releases, high profile games, available day one or available within the opening couple of months and more to come in the future.
Yeah.
If they can come out there and make that type of proclamation, it's very encouraging for what type of platform and ecosystem the Switch 2 can build in terms of third party support. So I'm hopeful that third party will make a statement because I think Nintendo, they'll make the statement in their traditional way, especially if they are focusing on that launch window area with maybe one or two more down the pipe announcements. But third party really have to make a loud exclamation in this direct, and I'm hopeful for that.
Yeah, I agree with you. You said the word statement. It's very well put because I would have said exactly the same thing. It's really going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. But I do think that not only a third party is going to make a statement, it's also a statement that look, this hardware is sufficient enough to run these larger open world games that really kind of struggled on the original Switch. And now, we have so much more, available to developers, more power that you can bring these games over. You don't have to just sit back and kind of, you know, either work on some type of low cut Switch version or just ignore the platform at all. It's just, like you said, it's a statement that this piece of hardware is going to sit right next to the current generation of the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox and run games and make those games look as good as they do on those systems, or as good, obviously, with the upscaling and all that. So yeah, I think really this is a showcase of not only third parties showing up, it's also a showcase of the hardware itself and how capable it is, and what we're looking at as far as performance and power. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Third parties will definitely show up in a pretty big way for this, and overall, look, I'm pretty excited about this, Nate. I don't tend to get super hyped about these things anymore. I'm kind of I'm an old grumpy man these days, and this is just another launch. But I am quietly confident that this will be a good showcase.
Yeah, I'm going into it with, some excitement and anticipation of what Nintendo has next and in store for us. And, we'll give our reaction and thoughts after the direct airs, either later this week or early next week. But those are our predictions and thoughts for the upcoming Nintendo Switch 2 Direct. Let us know your expectations and predictions in the comment section below. And if you liked the video, give it a like. If you didn't, give it a dislike. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And until next time, continue to embrace the hate.
With Nate and MVG, dissecting all the lies. Make the hate rocket hard, MVG dropping knowledge bombs. Best podcast sitting strong, guiding us where we belong. Through the pixels and the codes, breaking down what future holds. Nate and MVG showing us the gaming gold.